Three Lost Children, a Daylesford story. By the 1860s, alluvial gold found in the Daylesford area in 1851 had dwindled, and the shift was to other fields. William Graham was an immigrant from Scotland who had settled in Connell's Gully on the outskirts of Daylesford with his family. His sons, William and Thomas, were of pioneer stock, able to be trusted to make their own adventures while their parents worked. This story is William Graham's story as much as it is his two sons. It is also the family Burman and the community of Daylesford story. Sometimes it takes a tragedy or a significant event to bring diverse peoples together as a collective force. This is one such time in local history. And so the story unfolds. Connell's Gully, 1867. Sunday, June 30th, 1867. 9:30 a.m. near Table Hill. William and Thomas, with their friends Alfred, known as Arthur Burman, and the boy Griffith, were playing near shallow diggings not far from their homes, chasing wild goats. This was a time full of adventure for young children. So much to see, so much to do, so much to learn and experience. So many new people moving into the district, searching for gold, cutting down forests, farming. This was a town founded on gold. The timber industry developed also because gold mining needed timber. Farming expanded because miners and timber workers needed food. Chinese market gardens were set up beside creeks and on the edges of town. Pockets of small allotments were cleared by European migrants to grow potatoes, sheep and cattle, and the more exotic vines and fruit trees from the Swiss Alps and the Mediterranean. Many solid structures were built as merchants and businessmen moved into the district. Daylesford became a town of churches, hotels, banks and produce stores. New telegraph poles had been erected and communication between small towns and big cities became a reality. Regular transport to rail was available via the American company Cobb & Co. The influx of new chums and people passing through was great, and by 1867 Daylesford was a town divided into many parts. Heavy equipment was being brought in by rail and hauled to towns by bullock and draft horse. Wagon tracks opened into roads. Sawmills surrounding Daylesford multiplied. Little hamlets sprang up around timber mills. Tents and crude wooden buildings selling produce and equipment set up close to mining and timber operations. Tradesmen and service people opened stores. Mounted police, a lock-up, and a grand courthouse came into being. A town of movement and progress and exciting times. People from all nationalities moved to the district to live and work together, yet apart in their own cultures. It was a cold but clear morning when the boys reached the junction of Wombat and Sailors Creeks. The boy Griffith argued with William. He didn't want to go any further, but William insisted they go on. So instead, three boys set off on an adventure, and the boy Griffiths went home. Failing to find the elusive wild goats, the three boys crossed Wombat Creek near the junction and clambered up the steep south bank of Sailors Creek, with William leading the way. In 1867, the woods around this area were more like parkland than the rough shrub of today. Crossing the Daylesford-Creswick Road, the boys walked to the summit of Sailors Hill, following a rough track that became Ridge Road. On the way, the boys passed close to the Chinese market gardens, clinging to the banks of the creek that now feeds Daylesford Lake. But this was winter, and the Chinese gardeners were probably somewhere fossicking for small nuggets left behind in abandoned mines, or digging their own special round holes. Between 2 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, while happily walking along the Ballan-Daylesford Road towards Sailors Falls, about 3 miles, 5 kilometres from town, a Musk Vale storekeeper, Mr. Much, saw them. He turned them around and took them back along the road, and told them to follow the new telegraph poles towards Daylesford. Being assured by William that he understood, he left them. Had the boys followed instructions, they would have been safe. Instead, they went back along the road to Stony Creek, crossed over, and followed a track to the Specimen Hill gold mine. No one was there. Thomas wanted to go home. William took his brother's hand and said, "Just a little further. We'll be home soon. I know where we are." Alfred just kept on walking. Towards dusk they came upon a clearing. An older boy, John Quinn by name, saw them and asked them what they were doing. Shouldn't they be getting home? John tried to tell William that he was lost, but William knew better. John ran to his neighbour's house, but by the time they got back, the boys were gone. William Graham, aged 6 years, 6 months, his brother Thomas, aged 4 years, 3 months, and their friend Alfred Herbert Burman, aged 5 years, were never seen alive again. There would be no comfort for 3 small boys this night. A sudden change came over the weather that evening. Gale-force winds blew in from the north, and heavy rain began to fall. That night was the coldest that winter. Back at Connell's Gully, 2 frantic fathers had been out searching for their sons since lunchtime. Monday, June 1st, at first light. The fathers, their friends and the police, called in the previous day, renewed their search around Wombat, Sailors and Stony Creeks. Mr. Mutch reported in, and the search shifted to Specimen Hill. Miners, horsemen and men on foot turned up to help. With mounted policemen, they scoured the bushland around the mine until nightfall. Tuesday, July 2nd, more people heard about the children's disappearance and joined in the search. There were more than 100 horsemen and hundreds of other men on foot. Workers downed tools and formed groups spreading out from Specimen Hill for miles. Small footprints in the mud near Wombat Creek. Searchers gave up for the night. The weather had closed in that morning, making search more difficult. All day the bells had rung. The town's bellman had walked the streets, announcing there'd be a special meeting. The hall was packed with people overflowing into the street. It was agreed. Businesses would close. More people would be available to search. Black trackers would be brought in. Volunteer firemen would join in. Wednesday, July 3rd, 8 a.m. Again they assembled at the Specimen Hill mine. All were ready. The weather was cold with gale-force winds, rain and fog, with snow a possibility. Would it be today that the children were found? Black trackers were unable to follow the small footprints because of searchers and the weather. Another public meeting was held, this time to offer a reward. Searchers were told to bring their dogs. Thursday, July 4th. The fire bell tolled. 200 dogs with searchers in their hundreds started out that morning. The streets of Daylesford were deserted. Heavy rain and trampled bush made the black trackers' job fruitless. Search results, nothing. Friday, July 5th, every mine was searched. A 4th meeting held. They still had a chance, didn't they? Tuesday, July 8th, Mayor thanked at public meeting number 8. Hope wanes. July 16th, William Graham makes a statement in the local newspaper. When we have returned home night after night and told them of the endurance, energy and real sacrifices this community has suffered, they are assured that all human aid possible has been done. What did happen to the boys after they left the Quinn property and disappeared? Did they shelter from the weather that night, or keep on walking? We will never know. What of those people that lived in isolation throughout the forest? Surely someone saw something. Perhaps the children were just too tired to cry out. Daylesford Express, July 4th, had a description of the boys, and another, reward, wanted dead or alive. William Graham, 7 years old, tall for his age, thin, sandy hair, fair, freckled face, black cap with peak, shepherd plaid cravat, drab jacket, dark tweed trousers, lace-up boots with sprigs. Thomas Graham, 4 years old, 3 months, tall for his age, stout build, sandy hair, fair complexion, blue eyes, black cap with velvet peak, no necktie, black jacket, drab wincey knickerbockers, lace-up boots. Alfred, known as Arthur Burman, 5 years, small for his age, thin, dark brown hair, black cap, brown jacket, light vest, black trousers, old boots. The children's story found its way overseas. By early August, everything was getting back to normal in the town of Daylesford. The boy's disappearance left to Providence to clear up what man could not. Friday, September 13th. Woodcutter Michael Mackay's dog brought home a bone with a boot attached. With neighbours, Mackay searched the bush until dusk. Saturday, September 14th. Mackay brings in extra help, J.H. Wheeler and the 2 Bryan men. With neighbours Riddle and Stewart, they find the remains of the boys in a large hollow tree. It is said the boys walked the distance from Connell's Gully to Mount Lightwood in one day. Perhaps not. John Quinn saw the boys at dusk that first day. Then the weather turned. A map showed just how close the children were to being found, but by the 3rd day it was already too late. If the children had managed 1 more mile on their walk over the hill, they would have reached Wheeler's sawmill and the Musk Creek settlement and safety. But they were too tired, too small, and unable to continue, not even for that 1 more mile. William, Thomas and Alfred were taken to the Farmers Arms Hotel, awaiting burial. An inquest was held. Questions without answers were asked. Verdict: misadventure. An overwhelming sorrow tore at a community soul. Tuesday, September 17th. Funeral notice. The friends of Mr. William Graham and Mr. Benjamin Burman are invited to follow the hearse to the Daylesford Cemetery. The funeral is to move from the Farmers Arms Hotel at 2 o'clock this day. Daylesford Express. Public notices. His Worship the Mayor respectfully requests that all places of business be closed from 1 p.m. Groups of men, women and children gathered along the route. At 2 p.m. the hearse left the Farmers Arms Hotel. The procession slowly wound its way around the lower slopes of Wombat Hill. Miners and woodsmen and townspeople stood silently on either side of the road. At the junction of Jamison, Howe and Raglan Roads, Raglan Flats, the cortege turned into Camp Street. It passed Jamison's Hotel, the Cobb & Co depot and J.G. Howe's produce store, moving into the police precinct area of the 4-year-old courthouse and lockup, built for swift justice and ready for any locals who wanted to cause trouble. The procession passed the Albert Hotel and up towards the corner of Camp and Victoria Street, and the Christ Church of England built of local stone. Once into Victoria Street, the cortege passed 2 churches, St. Peter's Catholic Church and the Wesleyan Church. These 2 churches stand on opposite corners of Duke and Victoria Streets. The bluestone building of St. Peter's Catholic Church, with its wooden bell tower that later subsided into a mine shaft, and the Wesleyan Church, whose brick spire was funded by J.G. Howe, the produce merchant. All churches held services this day. Where the hearse and its cortege passed these magnificent buildings and turned into Vincent Street, people stood quietly watching. St. Peter's impressive bell was silent, where once it had tolled in harmony with the firehouse bell when first the children went missing. The firehouse was a functional building a little further along Vincent Street, past the post office. The brigade was formed after the Freemasons' hotel burnt down, showing a need for the service. Turning into Vincent Street, the cortege halted at the borough chambers until councillors and borough officers took their seats in a 4-horse coach. The cortege line was now estimated as being over half a mile. Around 1,000 people gathered outside the borough chambers, a wooden building between others occupied by doctors, dentists, and 2 hotels. The crowd watched as dignitaries positioned themselves in their carriages, and the milling of people returned to an orderly queue. All businesses had closed at 1 o'clock that afternoon as a sign of respect, as requested by the mayor that morning. The proprietors of those businesses stood outside waiting for the cortege to pass. 600 people followed behind the hearse, with families and dignitaries in their carriages and coaches down Vincent Street. Men on horseback and many other men, women and children followed on foot after them, past shops and hotels, banking and insurance businesses, doctors and chemist establishments, and carts and horses tethered to posts. A community was in mourning. The cortege turned into Howe Street, past a large grocery store, the solid handmade brick building of the blacksmith, past Thomas Very, the undertaker, and again turned into Raglan Street. The Daylesford Express wrote once of the procession, "The pageantry of the funeral may not have matched larger cities, but the sincere sympathy of the mourners more than compensated for any display of pomp." The grandeur of the occasion had a remarkable and imposing appearance as the line of vehicles, equestrians, and those on foot slowly made their way back past the Farmers' Arms. A large number of people waited until the cortege went past, before swelling mourner numbers at the cemetery to at least another 1,000. As the hearse made its way through the cemetery gates, every head was uncovered and bent. There was an audible sigh as the children were placed in the same grave, Thomas and Alfred side by side, William above them, protecting them. When the service ended, small groups of people slowly turned away until only a few remained. For the few that lingered, their loss changed their lives forever. 2 grieving families returned to their homes alone. William Graham moved the remainder of his family out of the district soon afterwards. The Burman family stayed. A monument placed by public subscription stands to this day. But that is not the end of this story. William Graham's success in the goldfields around Castlemaine and Creswick and his return to the area was duly recorded. In his later years, Mr. Graham showed his appreciation to the town of Daylesford and its people for the community's unselfish, if at times misguided, enthusiastic attempts to find the children. In 1889, he set in trust an amount to be invested to present an award. This award is known as the Graham Ducks Award, in memory of his 2 sons, William and Thomas Graham, and of the 3rd boy, Arthur Burman. So much did one man, William Graham, have love for his 2 lost sons, that he gave such a legacy to the people of Daylesford that his children's story would be remembered. William Graham's tribute to his sons lives on, as does their memory. In retrospect, early in the 20th century, someone returned to Table Hill and planted 3 memorial box trees. They stand proudly today near the first cairn unveiled on September 17th, 1967, by the Daylesford Historical Society for the centenary of the Lost Children's Walk. Every few decades, the children's story resurfaces at a time when people feel the need to belong as a community, or some great event or tragedy comes to test the courage of the everyday person. The hamlets and settlements, names significant in the history of Daylesford and the story of the lost children, much remain. Names such as Connell's Gully, Table Hill, Sailors Hill, Sailors Falls, Wombat Creek, Stony Creek, Specimen Hill, Musk Creek, Mount Lightwood, Wheelers Hill, Bellato. Most of the large timbers where the children had played have been cut down. The Chinese market gardeners have left the creek flats, and instead there is a mighty lake built in the 1920s. The tracks the children walked along have become roads or timber tracks. Where the hollow tree stood in 1867, among other tall timbers, it alone stood until 1950. Today, where there had been forest, there is now farmland. Where there had been gold mines and sawmills, there is now forest. At the centenary of the Lost Children's Walk in 1967, a cairn was placed on Table Hill. Another cairn was placed at the Wheelers Hill site. In 1988, in the bicentenary year of Australia, the Children's Walk was officially opened. The fires of 2009 exposed much of where the children had walked, and holes and old diggings once more appeared as the undergrowth burned. Much has returned to how it was before the fires, and designated cleared tracks and marked directions show the way. Since the 2009 fires cleared this undergrowth, there has been a conscious effort to keep the forest from getting into the same state pre-fires. The Musk Vale, Hogan's Lane, Musk Creek fires of 2009 started at the Bolan Road, Hogan's Lane area, where the children crossed the road after ignoring Mr. Mutch, the Musk Vale storekeeper's instructions of how to return to Daylesford and safety. Visitors coming to Daylesford are invited to come to the Daylesford Museum at the Mechanics Institute in Vincent Street to find out the full story of the 3 lost children and also have an insight to local history and the artefacts housed there. The Mechanics Institute, also known as the School of Mines, has become the home of the Daylesford Historical Society and local museum. Although changed somewhat, it doesn't take much imagination to see the buildings as they once were in 1867, as there is a leaflet called the Daylesford History Walk, with a short line on each building. St. Peter's Catholic Church is still there. The Wesleyan Church and the Church of England and a few more churches, besides, are still there. The Farmers Arms Hotel is there, and the monument at the cemetery, the cairns placed in 1967, the official Lost Children's Walk, is reopened. Visitors coming to Daylesford can experience living history. They can visit the churches, the courthouse, walk down Vincent Street. They can walk where the children walked and read their story and wonder at a father's love. The visitor may also see the 2 cairns, one marking the beginning of the walk at Table Hill and the other at Wheeler's Hill, where once a mighty tree sheltered 3 small boys. As it was said at the beginning of this story, there are many other stories that make up this little corner of Victoria, and the 3 lost children's story is but one. For what is the future without a past to build on and to learn from?